Hey everyone, so I was scrolling through Twitter one day, and the almighty algorithm fed me this cosplay by someone called Norafawn. Now, I'm far too uncool to know who this character is supposed to be, but I really appreciate how graphic this cosplay is. Having a graphic quality, first of all, means that it reads extremely well on a pure shape level. There's a variety of sizes of shape, and each individual shape feels easy to draw by being made of simple lines and curves. Secondly, this whole thing has a clear organization of local values. What I'm doing here is sampling an average value for each part and reducing those parts to flat colors. You know, as if the whole thing were just paint bucket filled. This removes the lighting and all the detail. As you can see, this still reads incredibly well. This kind of powerful graphic statement is a staple of animation. To create an effective color model for a character, it's a good idea to embed contrast into the grayscale values so that all those different local values read clearly. Now, this costume has that graphic quality not only on a flat color level, it still has it even with lighting. And that's what impresses me the most. So here with the eyedropper tool, I'm sampling the average light and shadow colors of each part. And once my little chart there is done, I'll convert that to grayscale for further study. The organization is achieved by having each part's light and shadow not interfere with another's, even on areas whose local values are close together, like the apron and the pants. They maintain a good step of separation there, both in light and in shadow. The same is true on the lighter components, the shirt and the skin. That same light and shadow separation is there. You can practice this with a simple arrangement of spheres. I've made each sphere the same local value as each part of the costume, and now just rendering some form, simple light and shadow, but doing my best to preserve that sense of separation. It's important to know that nature doesn't always do this, and that's especially true in shadows. In fact, it's more common to see shadows grouped together, sort of sharing an overall statement. Let's compare these two options to see what the graphic differences are. Artists have made careers out of merging shadows into single tones, even across multiple materials. In fact, I used that exact approach in my character design series from a while back. I'll throw a link on the screen in case you haven't seen it. On the opposite end, you have pieces like these. In these pieces, all of the values, including the shadows, are intentionally kept separate, which is more in line with what we're seeing in Norafawn's work. Alright, so I'll do a full painting of this now to show you how you can go about capturing this graphic effect. First, I'm laying in a basic line of action. I haven't even mentioned that this pose is also very good. After all, it's the pose that composes all those graphic shapes. I threw a few cylinders in there to remind myself that these things are still three-dimensional forms, even though I'll be playing up their 2D shape. You know, if your 3D isn't there, your 2D is going to suffer. There is a wonderfully simple S-curve running through this pose that I'll be sure to capture here at the outset, and I'll start building all my shapes around that. And this is just my first stab at the shapes. I'll be refining them constantly as I now go to put value and color on. Remember, I'm trying to make these shapes as easy to draw as possible. Often that means smoothing out or simplifying the contours in the reference. Although, like I said, this reference is already very good. And this white rectangle behind her further emphasizes the graphic nature of this piece. So just filling in my colors with their basic local value groupings. It also occurs to me I don't have to draw her taking a selfie, so I'll lower the arm in this one. Okay, at this point, I'm going to take away the reference, because as I build this up, I want to evaluate my progress in the context of this painting. I don't want to get bogged down with pixel by pixel comparisons. Here I'm picking a value for the shadow of the shirt. You can see in the color picker how light that value still is, even though it's shadow, because I know that I want the light of the apron to still be many steps darker against it. By the way, I think my base colors will be the light colors, at least to start with. So I'm putting in a shadow pass for the apron now, and right alongside that, I'll get into some lights as well. These values are caused by folds of the fabric that face up, and therefore get a little more light coming down from above. I want to bring in the reference though, to show you that even these shapes are graphic. Notice how they're all like squarish or triangular. Now, my shapes are not an exact copy of the reference shapes. I'm rendering these folds in my own way, but I do want to get that graphic language in all the shapes. To help this, I'll err on the side of hard edges. Hard edges delineate shapes quicker, they're just easier to see. So here's the light on the pants, and notice that it's barely even there. Because of that value categorization, I really don't have much room to play with here. In fact, a little trick I like to do in cases like this is relate the light value of one thing to the shadow value of another thing. In this case, the light of the pants is roughly the same as the shadow of the apron. Building in that kind of subtle relationship will help different elements of your painting feel connected. Working on the flesh tones here, and there's really no difference in process. The head gets divided into light and shadow the same way as the shirt, the apron, the pants. I'll refine the facial features as I go, but the first step is to get the graphic read starting to happen there. And jumping from that straight into clothing folds may seem odd, but it's really just a continuation of the same problem, finding those graphic shapes. If you know a little bit about the anatomy of clothing folds, you can manipulate their graphics quite a bit. And luckily I've got a whole tutorial on understanding and drawing clothing folds. I'll put a link on the screen. It would be a good supplement to this lesson. Once I feel confident with the shapes on the face, I'll dial up the contrast a little bit, and I'll put in some smaller details like little strands of hair and those crest lights that run along the hair. The shoes are the only element in this costume that have a wider value range, and that's simply because they're made of a reflective material. The amount of reflection will increase with the angle of viewing. This is a very common phenomenon called Fresnel reflection. So in this case, I'm looking for how the side planes of those shoes really reflect that lighter background. Because I'm inventing this hand, I'm taking the chance to build it as graphically as I can. The head gets yet another layer of confidence built into it, including the hairpin detail, as well as fully stating the highlights on the head, which occur on the planes that point toward the light source. Just taking a look at the whole thing overall, I feel like bunching up the fabric here helps support that hand placement. And now it's time to complete this hand holding the phone, and I'm being very clear about this negative shape, as well as making sure there's a T intersection where the phone overlaps the apron. T intersections are a great way to make your overlaps feel deliberate. Just in this view alone, there are several of them, and they all contribute to that graphic statement. And here's a final look at our efforts, nice and punchy, and a tribute to what makes this a good cosplay. Now, if only someone would tell me who that character is.